All right, everyone. Parshas Chukas Balak this week is a double parsha. In Parshas Chukas, there are a number of different halachos that are discussed, a number of different mitzvos that are spelled out in the parsha. And the same is true with regard to Parshas Balak. There also is a parsha that is jam-packed, although Parshas Balak does not have any mitzvos. In the Parshas Chukas actually only has mitzvos pertaining to the first mitzvah that's discussed in the parsha, which is the mitzvah of para aduma, if someone contracts a high level of tumah. The highest level of tumah is coming in contact with a dead body or being in the same room as a dead body. So then, in such a scenario, you'd have to go through a tahara process. You'd have to go through a purification process in order so that you could resume bringing korbanos or eating sacrifices. So with regard to some halachos, it's obviously very necessary to go through that purification process. And the laws pertaining to that are very unique, exactly how the paraduma works. But we'll get to that in just a minute. And then Parshas Balak, there are absolutely no mitzvos discussed at all. And I want to just tonight keep in the back of your minds, and we'll kind of end with a question tonight that I'd like for you to think about, and I'm going to spend some time thinking about as well when we get to the end of the class, connecting Parshas Chukas and Parshas Balak. But I want to spend time this evening discussing, though, the mitzvah of para aduma, where we know the Torah tells us of that zos chukas haTorah, as you see it, you see on the screen, right? Thumbs up if you see on the screen, okay? Yeah, it's good, okay? Zos chukas haTorah, asher tziva Hashem leimor. That this is the law, a chok. A chok is a law that does not seem to have a rhyme or reason associated with it, which we'll discuss in more depth in just a moment. Daber el bnei Yisrael, go teach the Jewish people, v'yichu elecha, para aduma tamima asher ein bamum, asher lo aleh aleha ol. That you have to take for yourself this red heifer that is a pure, perfect, it has no defect at all, it has no blemishes, it is a perfect cow that is young, and then take it, and you're going to go through this whole purification process. You're going to take it, you're going to burn it, you're going to use its ashes and mix it with the water from the Meshiluach, which is a running spring going under Yerushalayim, and you're going to draw water from there. Everything needs to be done in a purified way. Then you're going to take you're going to take the pure water, and you're going to take these ashes and you're going to mix them. When you mix them, then the person who was impure is going to come before you, and you're going to sprinkle them. But here is the catch-22. The catch-22, which the Medrash makes famous as a major catch-22 that just makes it seem like there is absolutely no rhyme or reason for this mitzvah at all. It does not make any logical sense, is that when the individual, and it's a machlokas between the Rambam and Tosfos, whether or not this is a male Kohen that has to do this, or even a child could do this, but whenever the sprinkling takes place, when one person sprinkles onto another person who is impure, so the one who does the sprinkling, they started out as pure, but then they end, after they do the sprinkling, they themselves become impure. So it's so paradoxical. You are the one who's facilitating one becoming pure, and yet you turn around and become impure yourself. The whole thing is very paradoxical. There's another paradox that's pointed out by Tosos. The Mishnah discusses how did they get the pure water? Because the water and the mixture needed to happen by someone who never had any sort of tumah. We needed to make sure that they were not tameh at all, meaning they never came in contact with a dead body before, or were in a same room, or somehow contracted the tumah of mace, and they also could not have had any sort of impurity, which comes with physical maturity, which comes with, from puberty. One could have and contract a certain level of impurity that takes place within a person's body. So then if that's the case, how does the mei shiluach, how does the water get drawn? So the Mishnah describes this unbelievable commitment that there were these women who were pregnant, and what they did is that they went to live in seclusion, right? Maybe one of a biblical form of quarantine, but they volunteered to do this. That this is a way that they would live in seclusion, and they would ride out their pregnancies there. And then when they had their babies, so the babies were brought up in this secluded area that certainly was not able to come in contact with any sort of tumah at all. And when the children were around the age of 8 or 9 years old, so they would ride them on these huge oxen down to the mei shiluach, down into the well, in order so that they could draw the water. They gave them special kinds of containers that the children riding on this huge ox, that it was set up and designed in such a way that no tumah can come in contact with these children. They took these vessels, they went to the mei shiluach, they drew the water, and then they bring the water back, and now they have this pure water. But what are they now going to have to do? They're now going to have.
Are those? Is that a midrash, or is that in the
Mishnah?
It is in the Mishnah. Okay.
There's a Mishnah. There's a Mishnah in the second chapter of Maseches Para, Mishnah Gimel, the third Mishnah. Take a look. It's unbelievable. It's also cited in Maseches Sukkah on Daf Chaf Aleph. It's unbelievable. 21a. In Tractate Sukkah in the Bavli. It's unbelievable. So right over there, Tosos says, well, hold on one second. This seems to be like a tremendous, commitment that these women did. It's very righteous, fine, beautiful. The children are brought up in this way. But what's going to happen? The children get the water. Then what happens next? So then someone's going to have to take the water and mix it with the ashes. Who's that going to be? So Tosfos assumes, the Rambam argues, as I mentioned, but Tosas assumes that the water is taken by an adult male Kohen who mixes it with the ashes. Isn't that a big problem? Because now all of that effort that went into collecting the water seems to be for naught. It's like the biggest disappointment in the world. Because now that the water is being given over to someone who might have some sort of impurity associated with them, they're an adult, so then that's it. It's done. You shouldn't have gone through the whole thing in the first place. So Tosfos points out that this is another major paradox in this mitzvah of Para Aduma, that there's actually no way to do it in the right way. So Tosfos gives an answer, which in and of itself is a very inspirational answer. Personally, I find it to be very inspirational. Tosfos says that even though sometimes you know that it's not going to work out 100%, it doesn't mean you don't give it your best. It doesn't mean you don't shoot for the stars. But fine, that we're not here to discuss Tosfos' answer. But what I would like to just point out is that Tosfos is showing us another very strange thing about this mitzvah of Para Aduma. And this is exactly why, as the Sefer HaChinuch says, this is exactly why this mitzvah is called a chok. It's a law without rhyme or reason, because there are just so many things about it that are very, very strange. Now, most mitzvos, at least according to the Sefer HaChinuch, which we'll get to the Sefer HaChinuch soon, but most mitzvos have at least maybe not a direct reason that the Torah gives you the reason for. There are some mitzvos that are like that, where the Torah actually gives you the reason for Shabbos. The Torah gives us the reason for Shabbos, as the Torah says, "L'man yid'u l'dorosechem." I'm sorry, the mitzvah of Sukkah, "L'man yid'u l'dorosechem ki hoshaftis b'nei Yisrael b'sukkos." That the purpose of the mitzvah of sitting in a sukkah is in order so that we could remember the fact that God protected us when we were in the wilderness, either through the Ananei Akavo, through the clouds of glory, or that we actually had a hut to live in while we were traveling in the wilderness. The mitzvah of Shabbos as well is Lada'as ki ani Hashem mikadshchem, as the Torah says, that the purpose of Shabbos is in order to reflect on what's truly important in life, what's truly important about your relationship with God. That there are mitzvahs that the Torah is direct about its reason. But most mitzvos, the Torah is not direct with its reason. And the Rishonim try and find the ethical principles contained within the mitzvos. And this is what the main purpose of the Sefer HaChinuch, which is an anonymous work that was written the author wrote as a bar mitzvah present to their child. It was a 14th century Rishon, that in order so that their son can learn on Shabbos afternoon with his friends the Talmei HaMitzvos, the reasons for the mitzvos. Even the Rambam spends time in the Mor Nevuchim going through some of the ethical principles in order so that we can make the mitzvos more applicable and more accessible to the masses. This is something that's discussed heavily, but the mitzvah of paraduma seems to have no rhyme or reason at all. Take a look at Rashi. Rashi says, well, hold on one second. While I understand that there's no rhyme or reason for the mitzvah of paraduma, and maybe it could be that there's really no ethical principle that could be learned from the mitzvah of paraduma. However, Rashi points out that there is a very important purpose for the mitzvah. Let's take a look at what Rashi says. Rashi says, Zos chukas haTorah. Why is it that God points out the fact that this is a chok? Rashi says, Lefi, because. Shahasatan, can you see where my pointer is over here on the right side of the screen? Shahasatan, the umos ha'olam, because the Satan and the nations of the world, Monen es Yisrael, they're going to mock the Jewish people. Lomer maha mitzvah hazos. What's the purpose of this mitzvah? Uma tam yeshba. What's the this paraduma mitzvah just doesn't make any sense. Well, what are you doing here? Okay, I get, you could explain to someone Shabbos. Shabbos, I get. You could explain to someone tzitzis, right? Tzitzis, you look at it. That was what we pointed out. Tzitzis is like the prime example of a mitzvah that the reasons behind the mitzvah are so critical, in that it's supposed to make you think, and that when you look at the mitzvahs, it's supposed to remind you. When you look at the tzitzis, it reminds you of all the mitzvahs. So okay, fine. Most mitzvahs, I get it. You could explain it to me. What's the whole point of this mitzvah of paraduma? So Rashi says, Lefikach, therefore, kasav bachuka gzeira hi milefanai. Rashi explains that's exactly why God went out of his way to say that this is a chok, that this is a law. It's a law. It doesn't matter what the reason is. It's a law. You do it because I said so. It's a gzeras hamelech. It's a decree from the king. We have to go through the process of paraduma. Says God, why? Because I said so. You have no permission to ask the question of why. What you have to do for the mitzvah, that you have to learn. But why you do the mitzvah? Because I said so. Now this is critical. Rashi is teaching us a critical lesson in not just the mitzvah of paraduma, but really paraduma, the whole purpose of it, Rashi seems to tell us, is to serve as an ultimate guide for why we do any mitzvahs at all. Judaism 101. This is it. This Rashi right here. Why do we do mitzvahs? Whether we understand it or we don't understand it. Whether we appreciate it or we don't appreciate it. Why do we do it though? Because God said so. That's it. There is one reason. Which is why, by the way, the Sefer HaChinuch makes a point of not teaching what he feels as though the reason for this mitzvah is. The Sefer HaChinuch could easily quote Rashi as the reason for the mitzvah. That really to serve as a guide for all mitzvahs, that all mitzvahs are done for. But the Sefer HaChinuch makes a point to make sure that he does not give a reason for the mitzvah. Every other mitzvah, the Sefer HaChinuch gives a reason for it. Every single mitzvah. That the way that the structure of the work is that first he just quotes the textual source for the mitzvah, then he gives you what he believes is the reason behind the mitzvah or an ethical principle that can be learned from the mitzvah, then he goes into some of the laws. Every single mitzvah. That's what he does. It's not a long, each piece, each entry is maybe a page and a half or 2 pages, short entries, just right to the point. Here's what the mitzvah is, source from the Torah. Here's the reason for the mitzvah. Here are some of the laws. But when it comes to the mitzvah of paraduma, look at the words of the Sefer HaChinuch. He says, Af al pi, even though shemalani libi lichtov Ramazim, Mitame HaMitzvos, even though it is my nature in order to give the reasons behind all of the mitzvos, Shekadmu al tzad hapshat, that I feel are the most obvious reasons for the mitzvos. However, he says, and then he points out, he says that the whole reason why I do this is in order to give proper chinuch for my child, in order so that he can learn with his friends. But then he says, however, ki ra'isi l'Rabbeinu zichronim levracha herichu adavar be'emek suda v'gadol inyana ad she'amru, that our rabbis went out of their way to tell us shehamelech Shlomo, that the wisest of all men, King Solomon himself, hisik ladas b'ribui chachmaso kol tamei haTorah chutz mizu, that the Medrash tells us that Shlomo HaMelech was able to understand every single piece of the Torah, every single detail of the Torah, Shlomo HaMelech understood, except for Paraduma. So then how is it that I can give a reason for this mitzvah? He just skirts the whole thing. He says, well, this is not in the realm of giving reasons. But I think that it's important to point out that Rashi is telling us that the whole purpose of the mitzvah, though, is to serve as this model. That even Shlomo HaMelech, who was able to understand all of the mitzvos, at the end of the day, why is it that we do mitzvos? Because God said so. Reb Chaim Soloveitchik used to have a line that he would say often, that in learning the Torah, when learning the mitzvos, when learning through Gemara, when learning really any aspect of the Torah, you can never ask the question, why? The question why is never a good question. Why is it that the Gemara says this? The Gemara says it because the Gemara says it. Why is it that it says in the Torah X, Y, and Z? Because that's what God said. Rather, you have to ask the question, what? What is the Gemara trying to teach me? What are the mitzvahs trying to teach me? What am I supposed to do in this scenario? You ask the question, what? Why is not a good question. Because we know the answer already. God said so. That's exactly why we do mitzvos. Because God instructed us to do so. Because we stood at Har Sinai and we said, Na'aseh v'nishma. That's it. We made the commitment. Made a shvuah. Mushbava omein ma'ar Sinai. That we have an oath in place that we do the mitzvos because God said so and we made the commitment to follow his ways. But what it is that I can gain from the mitzvos, that's a different conversation. But Paradum is critical in that it teaches us this principle. I like to use an example when talking about this, the mitzvah of shechita. The mitzvah of shechita is a mitzvah that historically has always been attacked as one of the first mitzvahs in the realm of anti-Semitism. That whenever, one of the telltale signs that the agenda that an attack on the Jews is coming from is that they'll historically speaking, one of the first things that the anti-Semites would attack is shechita. The first of the Nuremberg laws was offering shechita, but throughout history, shechita has always been the first thing to go, and it was always that even in the 20th century, this became an issue. In very recent history, in the United States, this was becoming an issue. That Schlachthausen were being put on trial from animal rights activists, saying that the way we treat the animals is in too gruesome of a fashion, which is so strange because the way that shechita is supposed to be actually the most humane way to kill an animal. If you ever see the way that they kill animals with stun guns and other manners in non-kosher Schlachthausen, in slaughterhouses, it's very grimacing. The animals look very grimacing. It's very uncomfortable to see. But in the kosher slaughterhouses, it's done in a much more professional and neat, and it would seem as though in a less gruesome type of a way. In fact, that this is the reason for the mitzvah. The Sefer HaChinuch says that, he points out two reasons behind the mitzvah of shechita. One, he quotes from the Rambam, that the Rambam says because there's a prohibition of consuming blood, and the way that we slaughter the animal that cutting the trachea and the windpipe will release the most amount of blood from the animal, since you cut through the jugular. Or, and sorry if anyone is of weak foundation, but it releases the most amount of blood, and therefore it will be easier to kosher the animal after it's slaughtered. That's the one reason the Rambam gives. The Sefer HaChinuch points out another reason, because it's done in a way that kills the animal instantly in order so that it has the least amount of pain. But the Pri Megadim points out something very important, that let's say you did a shchita, let's say a sheikh did a shchita in a way that he slaughtered the animal in a very slow way. He did it in the right spot. He did it all correctly. However, it was extremely slow and therefore caused the animal pain, a tremendous amount of pain. And not only that, but in the plastics, medical manufacturing companies, especially in plastics, and the doctors in the Zoom can attest to this, that they are producing, things that are used in surgeries in order to, like clamps, in order to stop the flow of blood, right? So they're able to make these small, plastic clamps that, especially like in hip surgeries that have a tremendous amount of blood, they're able to stop the flow of blood in order to do the surgery more efficiently and more safely. So let's say you have a shochet who slaughters the animal in a slow way and then uses one of those clamps to stop the flow of blood. Is the shchita good? Says the Pri Megadim, yes, because they followed all of Hilchos Shchita, except they didn't follow the reasons given in the Rishonim for the mitzvah. But however, the shchita was still good. Why? Says the Pri Megadim, because why is it that we shecht the way we do? Because God said so. And that's it. We do mitzvahs because God said so. And that's the only reason that we really need. But we know that that's not really the only reason we need, because we also know that there is a mitzvah of the halachta b'drachav, that we have to go in God's way. Now, hold on. I just told you that, and we just saw from Rashi, that at the end of the day, why is it that we do mitzvahs? Because God said so. So if that's the case, we become extremely robotic in that I'm just going to go through the motions, I'll do whatever I'm told, and that's it. There's no emotional connection. It's just, I do what I'm told. Who says there needs to be an emotional connection to Judaism? Who says there needs to be an emotional connection to the mitzvos? I'll do what I'm told to do, and then that's it. But God himself tells us, no. You have a mandate to go deeper and to understand the principles, the guiding principles contained within these mitzvos. And that's through mandates like Kedoshim to you, be holy. Well, you didn't direct me in any sort of way, God. How am I supposed to be holy? Or the halachta b'dracha, following God's path. Or tamim tiyem Hashem Elokeichem, that we have to have a complete, wholesome relationship with God. There's no direction there. When it comes to shchita, okay, I do what I'm told. I know I have to slaughter, you have to do it. I put on tefillin. I gotta have this kind of box. I have to put it on like this. Okay, fine. Para aduma. I know what to do. I have to get the animal. I have to slaughter. I have to get the interesting way to get the water. Okay, I get it. I'll do it. I'll do what I'm told. It's an instruction manual. I'll do what I'm told. But then, how could God then come along and say, Kedoshim to you, be holy. Halachta b'dracha, follow in my ways. I have no clue what that even means. There's no direction. There's no details. Says the Ramban, that is the whole reason why it's so important to dig deep behind the mitzvos. You know what the guiding principle, you know what the guide is? What are the details of how to be kadosh, how to be holy, how to follow in God's path, how to have a wholesome relationship with God? You know what the details are? There are 613 of them. If you look in every single mitzvah, you're going to find a guide of how to live a wholesome, ethical, and moral life. At the end of the day, why are you going to do it? Because God said so. But that doesn't mean you ignore the question of what. It doesn't mean you ignore the fact that it's so critical to be able to dig deep behind the mitzvahs to figure out what is God trying to teach me here. What is something from this mitzvah that I could apply to my life when not performing this mitzvah? How is it that shaking lulav can inform how to be a better husband, a better father, a better neighbor? How is it that the mitzvah of shechita can inform me to be a better father, a better husband, a better neighbor, a better congregant, a better friend? That is what we need to ask ourselves. Not why, but what. When we live life with that kind of a relationship, when we go through the mitzvahs with that kind of a perspective, so it creates a whole new reality for us. It's a whole new way to approach mitzvahs. Where I'm not just doing it because I need to do it. That's why I'm doing it. But there's also the what aspect to it. I'm going to leave you with just one question to just think about. I promise you I'd leave you with a question. With one question to think about, which is, isn't it fascinating that we have a double Parsha this week, where we have 3 mitzvos in the first Parsha that only have to do with the mitzvah of Para Aduma, this chok, this model of you can't ask the question why and only ask the question what, then to another Parsha that doesn't have a single mitzvah in it at all. That's question number 1. Question number 2 is Parshas Balak. Very, very quickly, what happened? That Balak, the king of Moab, Balak ben Tzipor Melech Moab, he commissioned Bilam Harasha to go curse the Jews, right? And there's a whole story, and you should read through the Chumash to appreciate the story. There's a whole story, in terms of how he finally got Bilam to go, and then he with the donkey, and the donkey didn't let him. Okay, the whole story, and then finally, then Bilam starts giving the curses to the Jews, but every curse that comes out of his mouth actually turns into a bracha. Okay. When did the Jews find out about the whole episode with Balak commissioning Bilam Harasha to go curse the Jews? When did they find out? If you stop and think about it for just a second, you'll realize that as you're reading through the Parsha, you'll realize that, well, they didn't find out about it then. You know when they found out about it? They found out about it right before Moshe Rabbeinu died. Moshe Rabbeinu was about to die, and he hands them a Sefer Torah. They're going through the Sefer Torah, probably right after Moshe Rabbeinu died. They found out about this. They're going through the Sefer Torah. They start with Bereshis, creation of the world. I remember learning that in nursery school. Oh my gosh, I remember my parents telling me all these stories about Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Unbelievable. Wow, our Alter Zeta Yosef. Wow, that's how we ended up in Mitzrayim. Oh my gosh, I can't believe there was such a rift between brothers. Oh my goodness, yes. I remember all of the stories I was told, all of the Pesach Seders, sitting and going through the story of the Exodus. Oh my goodness. Wow, the Mishkan, I know it's such a beautiful, we still have the Mishkan, all of the halachos, let's review some of them. Beautiful. We're getting through Sefer Vayikra. We're up to Sefer Bamidbar. Oh my gosh, that was such a mistake sending those spies. What were we thinking sending the spies? Oh my goodness. Now Parshas Korach. Wow, that was wild. Parshas, the whole episode with Korach and all, that was really, but Baruch Hashem, we're here. We made sure to stay with Moshe and Aaron. Okay, great. What? Parshas Balak? There was some crazy guy out there that tried cursing us and almost destroyed our entire people, and we didn't even know about it? Why is Parshas Balak right next to Parshas Chukas? What's the connection between that and everything we discussed this evening? All right. Unfortunately, I have to sign off, although I love the conversations post-class. But I have another shir waiting for me. Pleasure learning with everyone, and have a wonderful Shabbos.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Of course.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.